Matt Schauf and Shane Hallam of DraftSharks.com here to break down some potentially big news for both redraft and dynasty fantasy football. Recently, Cameron Wolfe of NFL Network reported that the Jaguars are expected to play Travis Hunter full-time at cornerback in the coming season, limit his usage at wide receiver. Shane, it's February, so it's a little bit early for something like that to be decided. And it's a report. We don't know the source for sure, but it's also the time of year where there's not a whole lot going on. So there's both room and reason for us to dig into it, to think about what it might mean, because I think it's a move that if it does play out the way Cameron Wolfe reports it, then it could be really significant both in redraft and dynasty, like I said already. And, before we get into the impact, we get lots of reports from lots of sources at this point. This isn't Tony Pauline telling us that Mike Evans is going to retire. This is a guy who is a national NFL reporter for NFL Network, who is based in Florida, or at least has been. I know that he, before joining NFL Network, was reporting on the Dolphins. So I know that he's at least down there, has probably developed sources down there. So that's the starting point. Now let's get to what this means. First off, how are you reacting for redraft purposes to this report on Travis Hunter? Are you like, all right, well, I guess we just push him way down the wide receiver rankings for the season, or are you a little bit more hesitant?
I'm a little bit more hesitant to completely just set the nuclear bomb off and send them all the way down the board. I think there could be a potential value if enough people are doing that, just saying I'm not drafting Travis Hunter no matter what. I mean, I would still love to have Hunter on the end of my bench and see what happens. We had some indication of this from the GM James Gladstone in January, who said that corner is a position that we have a few guys with expiring contracts. By default, you can expect there to be a higher emphasis on Hunter's placement on that side. I think the Cameron Wolfe report, coming from a pretty respected reporter, made it feel a lot more real that this could happen. But as you said, it's still mid-February. I don't think the Jaguars probably know exactly what they're going to do with Travis Hunter yet. They don't have to have that plan developed. So to me, in these early drafts, I'm very cautious, but still willing to draft him at some point if the value becomes good enough.
Yeah. So, and it's important to separate redraft from dynasty here. So we're talking redraft first. We'll get into dynasty next, but there are several angles that I think we need to consider here. So first off, fantasy players are always going to be like, what? He looks so good at wide receiver. Why would you play him on defense? I mean, they drafted him as an athlete knowing that he had this ability on both sides of the ball. So it certainly makes sense for his NFL team to at least consider playing Travis Hunter more on defense after having a year to see what he can do and to see what you have around him. So currently, wide receiver is quite a bit more valued in the NFL than cornerback is. If you look at the over-the-cap projections for this season's franchise tags, it's $21.4 million at cornerback, $28.8 million at wide receiver. So it's currently more valuable to have that wide receiver than that cornerback if things are equal on both sides. We saw limited corner play for Travis Hunter as a rookie. We also saw a growing offensive role before his knee injury. But after that knee injury, right around mid-season, we saw the Jaguars acquire wide receiver Jakobi Meyers and then extend him for another 3 years at $60 million total. That carries him through 2028 with Jacksonville. We also saw Parker Washington break out for Jacksonville in that time frame. He's now heading into the fourth and final year of his rookie deal, so he's going to be there for at least 2026. Looked very good as the full-time slot after Travis Hunter went down. And as you alluded to with the GM comments, the Jags are very light at corner right now. Montaric Brown and Greg Newsome are set to hit free agency. Brown was the only Jaguars cornerback to play more than 56% of the defensive snaps last year, and even he only played 67%. Like I said, he's about to hit free agency at age 30, so not even like a player that they for sure would want to bring back to play a big role. So the thing that I like to do first when there's news like this where we have to decide how seriously to take it is look at whether it makes sense for the team. And I think in this case, it makes sense. Obviously, we don't really have the behind the scenes view to see what Travis Hunter looks like in practice for them at wide receiver, at cornerback. We haven't talked to any of the coaches or anything to see what they think about his usage, but just looking at what the Jaguars have, they've got Washington, Meyers, and Brian Thomas Jr. at wide receiver, almost nothing at cornerback. So if Travis Hunter, they think, can be an elite corner, then playing him full time over there and sprinkling him in at wide receiver makes sense. Whereas on the other side, if you're playing him 2/3 to 70% of the time at wide receiver and limiting his exposure at cornerback, that's a lot tougher to maximize the value of a player, right?
Absolutely. I think we have to remember that this is not a situation where the Jaguars have to make a decision, and that is the season, right? If Jakobi Meyers gets hurt, if Parker Washington gets hurt, then you can shift Travis Hunter back to wide receiver more. Maybe they draft a corner who ends up being much better than they expect, and okay, so we have more of a strength here than we thought. But as the roster sits right now, that's the best way for the Jaguars to win games is just to play Travis Hunter at corner. That's the goal. Their goal is not for Travis Hunter to get stats like we need in fantasy football. It's not even necessarily for them to score 40 points a game. The goal is to win games, and having a better defense, especially in that secondary, is going to help more than putting Parker Washington on the bench, because when you have three receivers out there, that's what happened. I'd rather push some of these end of the roster corners that shouldn't be on the field on the bench and let Travis Hunter play it out that way.
Yeah, especially when you can still get him some time on offense. And I would imagine that when he is on the field offensively, it's going to be because they're trying to draw up a play for him. So you take away the plays where he's not doing anything, keep in some plays where he is doing something, and increase those chances that he helps you on both sides of the ball. So for redraft purposes, it certainly makes me put Travis Hunter way behind the top three Jaguars wide receivers. I would say, generally speaking, I'm not particularly interested at the moment in Travis Hunter for 2026 redraft. We'll see if come summer somebody gets hurt, if there's a surprise trade, if things change, if, practice begins and they're like, you know what, Travis Hunter really looks better on the offensive side, so let's change things up. There's room for all that to change. But for drafting right now, Travis Hunter would be a distant fourth for me among Jaguars wide receivers. So now let's kind of set all those guys up and consider how to treat all of them in current redrafting, which is, primarily best ball drafts right now. So if you look at our preliminary rankings on draftsharks.com right now, and just to set where those are, we've got Jared Small already did his numbers. That's what's driving the rankings right now. We have not argued through where all these guys should be positioned as a staff yet, giving our input on where certain players fall. That's coming next week when we have our Draft Sharks meetings in Florida. But you can find the rankings on draftsharks.com right now for your format. We're going to look at PPR here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see I've filtered by just the Jacksonville wide receivers. So that's something you can do if you look at our rankings, just to see where all those guys sit versus each other. And in our PPR rankings currently, we've got Brian Thomas Jr. at wide receiver 36. He's trailing Jakobi Meyers slightly in median projection. He's trailing him by more in floor, well ahead of him in ceiling. I think all of that is fair without digging into the specific numbers based on what we've seen from Brian Thomas Jr. through 2 seasons. But all of that puts Thomas narrowly ahead of Jakobi Meyers currently in 3D value in our PPR rankings. Meyers, wide receiver 38, so a couple spots behind Thomas. Parker Washington down at wide receiver 50. Travis Hunter at wide receiver 66. Shane, I think that we'll probably do a little bit of shuffling on exactly the numbers that are driving where those guys are positioned, but what do you think of those spots for those Jacksonville wideouts right now?
I think they all seem like values to me at those spots. I mean, I would probably want to, when we meet to bump Brian Thomas and Jakobi Meyers a little bit ahead. Just if this comes to fruition that you don't have Travis Hunter, a number 2 overall pick on the field, I think that gives more leeway for Thomas maybe to hit that ceiling or Meyers to get a couple more targets, even if Hunter gets his handful of snaps that are kind of drawn up for him. But really the value there is Parker Washington. I imagine he is going to have to rise from wide receiver 50. If Parker Washington's going to play 65 to 75% of the snaps and that are in the slot, and Hunter's going to come in for his handful, Parker Washington could easily be a top 40 drafted receiver. 50 just seems too low for what we know now. And even if it doesn't happen, if this report of Travis Hunter being a full-time corner doesn't come to fruition, I still think Parker Washington, with what he did last season, the Jaguars aren't going to be able to keep that off the field. He was such an asset to Trevor Lawrence that I think Washington is a clear winner of this situation.
And Lawrence talked him up at the Super Bowl afterwards. So, as you said, Parker Washington is actually among the top 40 in underdog ADP right now. We'll talk about that in a minute, and in helping to set where the market is on these Jaguars wide receivers. But digging more into that Parker Washington breakout that happened over the second half of last season, I'm looking at week 13 on from this past season. That's when we had all three of these receivers, Parker Washington, Jakobi Meyers, Brian Thomas Jr., playing full time. From week 13 through the playoff loss, Thomas and Meyers played every game. Washington missed one game in that span, but that's still a good time frame for us to see how those guys fit together in the Jacksonville offense. And what we saw was Parker Washington leading that group in target share at 25% over that time frame. Meyers second at 23%. Brian Thomas Jr. way behind those two at 15%. Targets per route also favored the other two over Thomas. Washington was at 28% in terms of target per route rate. Jakobi Meyers at 20%, Thomas at 14%. And that 14% not only put him a decent amount behind those two guys, it also trailed Tim Patrick, Austin Trammell, De'Ami Brown. Brenton Strange was ahead in both target share and targets per route over that same time frame. So a worrisome development for Brian Thomas Jr. Not reason to forget about him, but worrisome and certainly worth noting as we head into 2026 drafts. Now, air yard share also favored Parker Washington, 34% of team air yards to 26% for Thomas, 22% for Meyers. That's an area where Thomas gains some ground because his targets come deeper downfield, but it's also another mark in Parker Washington's favor because normally you look at a guy and think he's spending most of his time in the slot. He's going to get shorter routes. He needs target volume. He needs reception volume to drive his scoring. But we saw Parker Washington get down the field, 13.8 yard average depth of target. That's shorter than Brian Thomas Jr., but also ahead of Jakobi Meyers by a slightly more than it is behind Brian Thomas Jr. So Parker Washington really spent the end of last season looking like a dynamic player that was central to the offense. And that's certainly worth factoring in as we spin the Jaguars wide receivers forward. Now, let me hit their ADPs and then I'll get more of your reaction to these. In current underdog drafting, and that's the place where the most draft volume is happening right now. And if you check the best ball ADP on draftsharks.com, you're going to see up-to-date underdog ADP numbers. So we've got Brian Thomas Jr. at wide receiver 31. That's top of round 6. Parker Washington's at wide receiver 36, second Jaguars wide receiver. Jakobi Meyers at wide receiver 40. So you can see those three guys not separated by all that much. And then Travis Hunter well behind them at wide receiver 61 in round 13. So Shane, with the ADP framing, how are you treating these guys, assuming that you're going in to build a best ball portfolio?
I think I want to get shares of all three. I think all three have fair ADPs at this point. Now, Brian Thomas being at the high end of that is a little bit scary. I think just like our ceiling projections have. I mean, Thomas certainly has that ceiling. I think last year, the numbers you rattled off is hopefully more Brian Thomas's floor than what we should expect moving forward, but that certainly could be this offense. I don't think the Liam Cohen offense is necessarily built to say, hey, we have to target this guy because he's such a dynamic athlete. They'll target him if he's open, if he has single coverage. So because these ADPs are so close, I want to take a little bit of all of them. And honestly, it makes me want Jakobi Meyers the most, being the third. I'll kind of take the third guy of this group, and I feel pretty comfortable that when Travis Hunter does get snaps, it's not going to be Jakobi Meyers going off the field every time. So that combined with just how sure-handed he is, what we've seen from Jakobi Meyers throughout his career on the Patriots, on the Raiders, the volume that he can produce in terms of PPR leagues, and even half PPR leagues like Underdog is, wide receiver 40. I mean, I'll take Meyers more often a round or two later than Brian Thomas and be pretty happy with it.
Correct answer, Shane. Well done. It's certainly fair to say that Brian Thomas Jr. has the higher ceiling. I mean, we saw him finish in wide receiver 1 territory as a rookie, but we also can't ignore what happened last season. And what I'm going to be looking for really on the Brian Thomas Jr. front is I want to hear Liam Cohen or some coach say, we screwed up by not targeting him enough. And I'm not saying I want to hear that because I want a Thomas bounce back. That's what I'm going to need to hear if I'm really going to bet heavily on a BTJ bounce back. If they're like, we still like Brian, we're certainly going to keep him involved. If it's language more like that, or, if they're like, he was dealing with a couple of injuries that really limited him, we're looking forward to getting him healthier. That's another path that could get me to buying into more of a bounce back. But as it is, I'm with you. I'm going to mix in all these guys because we never know for sure what's going to happen, who's going to get hurt, and where the targets are going to go after that. But my top target among those three is going to be Jakobi Meyers. Like I said, he probably doesn't have quite as high a ceiling as Brian Thomas Jr., but he easily beats the other two on floor. We've got a lot more of a history of production for him, and often with quarterback play that's been worse than what he should get from Trevor Lawrence over the next couple of years. So I like Jakobi Meyers where he's going. Travis Hunter, I guess, like I might mix him in some at that level, but even at wide receiver 61 doesn't excite me. I'm not going to tell people not to take him in that range, but I think that there will at least be similar options in terms of upside there, if not guys with higher ceilings.
I'm also more comfortable taking a little more Travis Hunter in best ball, and those are the drafts that are happening now, where you could have that spike week that we saw against the Steelers, even on limited snaps. You could have a couple of those go off and him help you. I think in setting your lineups, wide receiver 61 is just too rich for me for a player that I'm not going to want to cut, but might not be producing for 5 weeks. It just makes it a lot more difficult, I think, to roster Travis Hunter in a shorter roster lineup setting league.
Now let's switch to dynasty because obviously it probably matters a lot more in redraft even because we're talking to people who spent first round rookie picks on Travis Hunter just a year ago and now have to wonder if he's going to be a cornerback who plays a smattering of offensive snaps the rest of the way. So here's where I would be more hesitant to give up on Travis Hunter. I would not just, dump him and assume that we're talking about a guy who is a cornerback for the rest of his career. So I mentioned Parker Washington's heading into the final year of his contract. If he's gone next year, then maybe it makes sense for Travis Hunter to play more on offense as soon as 2027. Maybe Brian Thomas Jr. gets traded at some point or continues to disappoint and looks like a trade candidate after this coming season. So I'm not giving up on Travis Hunter. I'm also not sure I'm chasing him. So let's assume for now we're talking non-IDP formats. I'm not ready to chase him yet, but I think he's in a range where I'd be okay with acquiring him. Shane, what do you think of Travis Hunter in Dynasty? I guess how much of a target would he be for you, and what are you willing to give to get him?
He's a little bit of a target for me. I think it's worth kicking the tires on. I have seen Travis Hunter traded in two of my one quarterback PPR dynasties. He was traded for a late 2026 first. I think one was the 111, one was the 112 in those leagues. I don't think I'm giving that up for him. I think I'm way too hesitant with the downside to do that. Would I send maybe a mid 2026 second offer and just kick the tires? I don't think it gets done, but I'd be willing to do that. I also think it's possible that his value falls more with this narrative through the summer. If it holds up or we see 1 or 2 weeks of primary corner play, then are you getting Travis Hunter for, a future late second, a future high third? Like, his value could really bottom out. That might be when I actually go after him, when it's nearly free and I don't have to worry about it. And as I mentioned before, I think it takes one wide receiver injury, Hunter being disgruntled and wanting more offensive time with what the Jaguars have invested. There's a lot of paths in a year, 2 years for Hunter to get fantasy value in Dynasty back on offense. But I'm not giving up a first round pick right now for him because of that downside.
Totally agree with that. If I get somebody who's panicking and they offer me Hunter for like a mid to late second or especially a third, I might be willing to go ahead and take that shot because we see more busts than stars come out of round 2 of rookie drafts. And, like we've laid out, there are multiple paths to Travis Hunter beyond this season becoming something. But as far as targeting him, I would probably wait until at least we're into the NFL season and seeing what's happening before I go after him any trades. If we get into this year and he is playing a lot of corner and not so much wide receiver, the value is just going to drop and it's going to get easier to acquire him, especially as teams are trying to win championships and not just, thinking long-term thoughts. So let's close this out by talking IDP. And I think, Shane, that it might be the instant reaction for people to look at this and think that a lot more time on defense, a lot less time on offense is good for Travis Hunter's IDP outlook. I think it's actually the opposite, but I want to get your take first. What's your reaction to Hunter's IDP outlook with assuming that things play out the way the Cameron Wolf report says?
I think it definitely makes it worse. I mean, you really want, if you have an IDP league with a cornerback slot, a guy that's playing receiver, and I can plug into my corner slot. I guess the only thing this does help with is that we're not going to get necessarily a position change. You know, if this was the opposite of it, said, okay, Hunter's going full-time receiver, very limited corner, you might have some services say, yeah, we'll just list him as receiver. And now it's like, well, you know, that isn't really worth it. So I think IDP wise, I mean, I think the luster's worn a little bit, unless you have that cornerback required, and you can still plug Hunter in there. He could still be a top player if he gets enough receiver snaps to get a couple catches a game and help boost that scoring. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think this news makes it better for IDP. I would have rather more catches from my corner than less.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that made him a potential IDP difference maker is that he was going to be a wide receiver who also plays cornerback. So we get, you know, potentially big time wide receiver numbers at a defensive position and probably the most fungible defensive position in deeper IDP leagues. Now, I don't think that the impact on his outlook is as bad for IDP formats as it is for, you know, leagues where he's just an offensive player, because anything that Travis Hunter does on offense gives you a boost to a guy who is playing cornerback. And like I said, a very fungible position, which also makes it an easier position for a player to become valuable. So if we get full-time corner who offers us some big plays, you know, a smattering of tackles, but also even, you know, 20 receptions for the season, that would be terrible for wide receiver scoring, but that would be awesome for cornerback scoring. So if you play in a league with IDPs, dynasty wise, or, you know, redraft once we get there, and you see people that are downgrading Travis Hunter significantly on this news because it's just not what they were hoping he was going to be, maybe there's a buy opportunity there. We could still get a guy who's a difference maker, even if the IDP ceiling is not quite as high as it once was.
I think it could be worth going after him in an IDP league if you know, if that narrative gets out there. But like you said, to me, I think a lot of people just view this on the surface and think it's really good when, yeah, he's still probably the top corner in your IDP league. But you know, more receptions would have been ideal.
Check out our full preseason rankings for your format on draftsharks.com now. And you can find our dynasty rankings on the site as well. Watch for updates over the next couple weeks as we dig into the numbers, as we argue with each other and try to convince Jared where players should move to. Of course, we're going to keep refreshing those rankings throughout the spring and the summer as situation and news change. You know, with the draft coming up, free agency coming up. So lots to change still. So those rankings are far from set at this point, but they are available for you to look at throughout. Keep tabs on the Shark Bites fantasy news section on draftsharks.com as well. That's where you can get instant analysis when news like this Travis Hunter update hits. It's just another way that we always strive to be your unfair advantage.